everyone. Welcome to today's podcast, where we are diving into a topic that hits home for music fans everywhere. A few months back, I set out on a mission to do the impossible: snag Taylor Swift tickets at face value. And as you might guess, it didn't go as planned. By the time I tried to buy them, prices had skyrocketed to 8 times their original cost. And I eventually ended up skipping the concert altogether. But here's the thing. This isn't really just a Taylor Swift fan dilemma. Whether you're a Diljit Dosanjh fan in India or an Oasis fan in the UK or Ireland, the struggle is really the same. Fans are either left without tickets or forced to pay jaw-dropping prices on resale sites. Add to that the server crashes and payment glitches, and it's really easy to see how chaotic this whole process can be. So this begs the question, is this fair? And more importantly, is anyone out there doing something to change it? So today, I, Niharika Salar, am thrilled to be joined by my friend and fellow PhD researcher, Ms. Katherine Pittalis, who recently presented her compelling research at our PhD conference here at Queen's Law School. We are going to unpack these issues and explore what's really happening behind the scenes in the world of ticketing, and you surely don't want to miss this. So hi Kat, thanks for your time today. Could you tell us a little bit about your ongoing research, please?
Thank you so much, Niharika, for that introduction. So I am now in my final year for PhD, and the past 3 years, my research is considering how malicious actors can weaponize algorithmic bots to manipulate markets within the music industry. And I look at the private and public measures that are trying to combat this issue. So specifically, I look at 3 types of bots. I look at ticket bots, which were the ones that you were up against when you were trying to get Taylor Swift tickets.
Yes, very complicated.
And then I look at social media bots. So these are the ones that you will find either posting, spam posts on there, or the ones who are basically trying to harm the reputation of certain celebrities or are trying to manipulate your opinion on celebrities and topics. And then finally, I look at stream bots. So these are the ones that you find on streaming platforms like Spotify or Apple Music. And they specifically will manipulate the amount of listens that certain songs have. So if you look at Taylor Swift and you look at how she's got billions of streams,
Right.
the question is how many of those billions are actually from genuine users versus artificial users?
There's so much to unpack there, but I always have this question whenever I hear somebody researching about bots. If you had to explain bot to a layman person, how would you simplify it? Because I get confused all the time. Like, what exactly is a bot? Who is operating it? How do you know? Who's behind it?
So this is sort of a main focus for my research because it's actually really difficult to provide a definition for what a bot actually is. There is a broad definition, which is essentially an AI entity that whoever has created it or obtained it will give it a specific automated task to perform. So this is dependent on the platform that it's actually distributed on and what its actual purpose is. So if you take the example of buying tickets, one of the bots will essentially be tasked with the function to just input all the personal information. So, your address, your name, your bank details to then purchase the actual ticket. But this is all done automatically. So it's literally within a second, it's all put in, done. But yeah, so it does depend essentially on the platform and what their purpose is. And in terms of who actually uses these bots, well, for tickets, for example, you've got two actors working with this. So you have the ticket touts. So these are the people who essentially will buy tickets with the purpose of reselling them for profit. And then you've also got personal use. So these are the people who actually use the bots to just get a ticket for themselves. So these are the ones who are literally, they're trying to compete with these touts who are also using bots. So you've got this kind of fight going on between them because you want to essentially get tickets at face value. You don't want to have to be paying more than you should be. So it's really a question of, do you give in and use this illegal technology to get tickets, or do you just, try your best, really?
Well, like they say, technology is always ahead of law. They come up with something and then law is trying to chase it.
Yeah.
You did briefly mention, and I would like to know more about this, which actors in the ticket market are you considering for your research? And you did mention a bit about bots that, how they are in your, how they are looked at. And how are these ticket bots specifically harming these actors which you're considering in the PhD?
So specifically, I'm looking at the artists themselves and sort of how these ticket bots are impacting their reputation, but also their capabilities to actually resolve this issue and what they're doing about it. I'm looking at the consumers especially because ultimately, they're the ones who are being affected by this, the fans, where they're not able to actually go and see their favorite artist because these bots are buying up the tickets in bulk and then pricing them out of actually having the chance to go see them. And then I'm looking at the primary ticketing websites. So this is Ticketmaster, who currently have the monopoly in the market. So they are the ones who will sell the tickets initially at face value to fans. And it's your kind of first chance to actually get tickets. And then I look at the secondary ticketing websites. So this is Viagogo, who do not have the best reputation considering they essentially allow these ticket touts to list tickets for obscene amounts of money, which unfortunately people will pay that money for it because if a concert's sold out, that's pretty much your last chance to actually try and get tickets. And then I look at social media as well and sort of how these channels are actually used to sell tickets. So essentially social media to me, it's almost like a black market where it's a hidden channel which hasn't really been properly looked at in terms of the buying and selling tickets sort of side of things. So that's a big area that I focus on as well. And then I look at also the promoters and the event organizers and sort of how the revenue from or the profit from selling tickets is affecting them if it's going, straight into the hands of touts versus straight into the hands of consumers.
So, the consumer part, of course, really interests me because I am a representative of that sample group which you're also researching, right? And we were just discussing this outside before recording this podcast. Have you had a chance to speak to any of the consumers? Do you get a feel of what they feel about this entire chaotic situation? I, for example, feel really frustrated. I was trying to buy a Coldplay ticket and I was trying to resell another ticket, and when I was trying to sell it on a Facebook group, there were so many people who wanted to buy it, and the next day they were all gone. Were they bots? Have you spoken to consumers? Do you plan on doing so?
Yeah, so this is the thing. When I was trying to get Oasis tickets, I had Twitter open in the background to gauge what the atmosphere was like, because with the Oasis example, you were given no indication of how much tickets were even on Ticketmaster. So I was trying to use Twitter to figure out, people ahead of me, sort of how much was I realistically going to be paying for these. And anytime a big artist goes on tour, honestly, if you just go onto Twitter, the amount of anger and frustration that people are feeling because you spend hours of your time just literally staring at a screen. You're almost like a zombie. That's how I describe it in my PhD. You're literally just staring at a screen, hoping to God it refreshes so that you can just try and get tickets. But most of the time, you're left empty-handed because either if it's a dynamic pricing strategy that's used, you're going to end up spending way more money than you should on tickets. Like, for example, Oasis, it went from £80 to £400 within 4 hours, which is absurd. But then, I have spoken to consumers as well, like yourself, who ultimately it's just so disheartening because you feel like you have no tools of your own to use against these touts and these bots. You're literally helpless because Ticketmaster aren't actually telling you what's going on behind the scenes. Like, you're in a queue, for example, for me, I was in a queue where I was 80,000th in the queue, which is wild. In fairness, it was Oasis, so it makes sense. But I had no indication of, how many users ahead of me were actually real. It said on Ticketmaster that they have so-called bot detection measures, but these, to me, they don't seem to work because it's like, how is it, even in the pre-sale, tickets were going on sale on resale markets straight afterwards, and you're like, something doesn't add up here. What are they actually doing that's helping? Because at the moment, it seems to be the case that this year especially, well, actually between 2022 and this year, it's just escalated now to a point where everyone is just fed up of this, the same story every single time.
So I was just wondering that has this been an old practice, or what has happened that now suddenly people are talking about it? Of course, there's a lot of media coverage, but in your opinion, have you come across something which has made it fast track and now everyone's raging over it? What's happening?
So this practice in particular, I mean, it has been around for a good number of years, especially just ticket touting by itself without bots being factored in. I mean, that's been around for many, many years, even since like the 90s. It's been discussed. But I think now, especially considering Taylor Swift, I mean, her tour was ginormous in comparison to previous tours. I think since her especially, it's just because she's got a lot of media coverage because of how valuable and sought after these tickets are. I think that's what spurred the media especially, and now the government to actually start looking into this again. And then not only that, I think even factoring in dynamic pricing, in my opinion, it's about time that the government, started looking into that again, because don't get me wrong, it works for other sectors. So you've got, Uber uses dynamic pricing, airline companies use it. It works for them, but for music, in my opinion, you need more transparency over what factors are actually being used to determine how to change the price of a ticket. So it can't just be levels of demand, because as you see with the Oasis example, it just skyrockets the price within hours. And it's such, in my opinion, an unethical practice in this specific sector. But then on the other hand, there's the argument of if you don't have it and you keep tickets at the low price, they're just all bought up by the bots. So it is a big deal, what do you actually do in this situation?
I know you did touch upon this, but for our listeners who may not really know about dynamic pricing, could you maybe just tell us in very simple terms what exactly is dynamic pricing and why is it good or bad in some industries, whereas in some sectors now, especially in the ticketing marketing now, it's a problem?
Yeah, so dynamic pricing, essentially, it's a pricing strategy which is where the prices are never fixed. So they respond in real time to like the changes in demand, for example. Or if it's like Uber, it'll respond to, let's say, how many cars are available, stuff like it, external factors, basically, which will impact the price.
Or it will charge you more for a night ride, stuff like that.
I mean, if it's like a Saturday night, Uber's going to charge you more because obviously everyone's out. Especially even concerts. I'll never forget this actually, where my friends and I, we were coming back from a concert and the price of an Uber had skyrocketed to, I think it was £50 for literally a 15-minute journey, which was crazy. And in the end, we walked home. But yeah, so in terms of for Ticketmaster, especially in the Oasis case, fans weren't actually informed that they were going to be using this pricing model. So going in, I just assumed, doesn't matter how long it's going to take, the price is going to stay the same, because I was given no indication at all. And then lo and behold, 4 hours later, I'm stuck with £400 for general standing, which is insane. So in that sense, Ticketmaster justifies dynamic pricing by saying it curbs ticket touts, because essentially, let's say a tout buys a ticket on Ticketmaster and they're trying to resell it. Ticketmaster's price, so Ticketmaster will technically use the secondary market to determine what price they should actually change their ticket on their platform. So touts can never, it leaves them kind of in a limbo because they never know how much to actually charge for their ticket, if that makes sense. But it also means, touts might spend a higher amount, so say the £400. And if they're trying to bulk buy tickets, that's a lot of money that they're going to be spending. So Ticketmaster then sees it as, they're not going to be wanting to spend that money, whereas real consumers would, for example. So that's another way that it kind of makes them not want to actually buy tickets from them. However, it does not work, as we can see at the moment. They'll still pay, they get through first, so they will pay, the £80 for a number of tickets, whereas genuine fans, like myself, will then end up paying the higher amount because of the queue and how it works.
So from where I can see, I understand that consumers are up against a lot of actors who are responsible for this kind of malicious bot activity. And in your opinion, is there any way we can point to somebody who can be held accountable and responsible for allowing this kind of malicious activity?
So in my opinion, it is very difficult to just hold one person accountable. If I could, I would say Ticketmaster, because, I mean, they are the monopoly. So they're essentially dictating sort of how to sell tickets. And artists and event organizers don't really have a choice in terms of who they want to sell the tickets, because Ticketmaster is pretty much the only one who can actually distribute them. So, I mean, the thing is, we have the legislation in place. There is like existing laws. You've got the Digital Economy Act 2017, which, it prohibits the use of bots to buy excess amount of tickets. So, on Ticketmaster, you can only buy maximum sometimes 2 tickets. So if you exceed that, then, it's criminal. But it's more an issue of enforcement of these existing laws. But then on the Ticketmaster side, you need more competition in the market, in my opinion. You need smaller companies coming in to essentially challenge or essentially just distribute its market power a bit more. So, I mean, you've got, for example, Eventbrite. That's another one, which is a primary ticketing website. But for concert tickets, artists aren't going to use them because they don't have as much power as Ticketmaster. So you need to somehow diminish its power to actually allow a healthier environment.
What do you mean by power? Financial?
So market power. So because Ticketmaster has so much market power, it's, artists don't want to use anyone else. Like, they can only use them. So they kind of essentially, like with the dynamic pricing, they're dictating how things are going. And no matter how many terms and conditions there are on tickets, or, no matter if it says that there are bot detection measures in place, Ticketmaster, they don't, in my opinion, they get profit from selling tickets. They get a portion of that amount. So they don't really care who they're selling the ticket to, in my opinion. As long as they're getting money, they're happy.
Right. And I can see that there's so much potential to look at this from a competition law point of view, right?
Yeah.
There are concepts which say that you can't take adverse advantage of your dominant position. And when you say of Ticketmaster, back home in India, I can think of this very popular platform called Book My Show. And yeah, when you think of booking concert tickets in India, Coldplay came and it was the same thing all over again. Tickets at big prices being sold on Book My Show. And then Viagogo is also there. But again, the prices were raised to like 10 times. And there's just no other platform you can go to. And from what I can see, I think from country to country, then it changes. But yeah, Ticketmaster is really big here. But in your opinion, is there anything which can be done to improve the ticket purchasing experience for fans? Like, is there any actual resolution to this problem?
That is the overarching question, really, my thesis. I mean, a big thing is, like I was saying earlier, is looking at other channels. So social media, for example, which, I mean, doing a quick search on Facebook the other day, I searched just Oasis tickets, and you have, I think, around 20 groups that are literally called Oasis buying and selling tickets that have thousands and thousands of members in them. And there is so much risk to consumers if they're using those channels, because Oasis, literally in their terms and conditions for a ticket, it states that you can only resell a ticket on Ticketmaster or this other platform called Twickets at face value. But going onto social media, there's no regulation around what people are commenting or posting in these groups. Like, I even found actually the so-called admins and moderators of the group are actual fake accounts. Just from doing a quick deep dive into...
Even the admins were fake?
Yeah,
fake
the
accounts.
admins of these groups are fake, which is insane to me. That
it's alarming.
Facebook aren't doing anything about it. They're allowing this to happen. And I think, don't get me wrong, so the Labour government are planning to introduce a price cap on ticket reselling. So it would mean that you can only resell a ticket either at face value or potentially 10% more, if I have that right. Which it has its positives and negatives, don't get me wrong. The negatives is that social media is then just going to become essentially a black market for ticket reselling because of how unregulated it is at the moment. Because how I interpret it is that, don't get me wrong, you have, Facebook Marketplace. So those are actual listed items. Those are treated as, a selling product. Whereas in these groups, they're just stating that they have a ticket. And then you go through the process of, messaging them and then facilitating actually exchanging the ticket. But a lot of times it's a scam. So you have Lloyds Bank recently came out that a lot of reports that it had about Oasis tickets fraud. 90% of those reports came from social media. So people essentially sent money on social media to fake accounts or scammers. And there is now laws in place where people actually, the bank will refund you the money, which is good. But I mean, that's now the bleak future at this point. So in terms of who I think, for me, in a dream scenario, it'd be, either strengthening existing legislation and enforcing it better, or even just creating a new piece of legislation, or even having a specific regulatory body. I mean, you've got the Competition Markets Authority, who are now investigating Ticketmaster again for their dynamic pricing, which is a very good positive thing. But I think this type of behavior needs to constantly be monitored because it keeps changing all the time. And in my opinion, I mean, not to sound kind of too negative, but I think if bots aren't handled now, they're literally just going to take over and just dictate the runnings of pretty much like so many different markets and also so many different events as well. Not to sound too negative, but I mean, one thing that I did come across, not just looking at Ticketmaster, but also other ticket distributors, was that with Wimbledon, I think their system works really effectively, where when you purchase a ticket from them, so from the AELTC, as they're called, essentially, if you can't attend anymore, you have to then sell your ticket, essentially give it back to the event organizers, who will then resell it for you. So you can't actually just transfer it to somebody else. They are the ones who have to facilitate that process. And I think that works really well because it means that, for instance, Touts, they can't just resell the ticket, because then, if you then try and go to attend it, Wimbledon will pick up, that you've bought it from the secondary ticketing website. Because not only that, you then also have to actually provide the event organizers with identification. So typically the driver's license or passport, and they will check that upon entry to make sure it matches up all the details and everything. So I think, in my opinion, it's a very effective way to go. Don't get me wrong, I remember last year I actually looked up on Viagogo if the people were trying to resell tickets, which they were, unfortunately, even though they definitely did not have those tickets. But I mean, being there and everything, when I had the fortunate chance of going to Wimbledon, you could tell they were very strict on who they were letting in, and the whole process itself, it seemed more effective than what Ticketmaster were doing. And not only that, actually, there is a case where they took somebody to court as well back in 2023, if I got this right, where this man called Hardiman, I want to say his name, he actually got sent to prison because he was actually buying and selling Wimbledon tickets. But this is the thing, this is what Ticketmaster, I mean, they can't take everybody to court, but they need to be more proactive about and monitoring who is actually buying their tickets and where their tickets are ending up, in my opinion.
So from what it sounds, Wimbledon as a stakeholder in itself is doing what it can do to sort of avoid this whole situation. But from a legal point of view and from a jurisdictional point of view, did you have a chance to research into any other jurisdiction, and maybe you thought that, okay, this is something which probably UK can do, or maybe follow footsteps, any country?
So I have been considering the EU and the US. In my opinion, the UK, in terms of legislation, is very similar to the US in terms of we have the legislation, but the issue is the lack of enforcement of it. So in the US, you've got the Better Online Ticket Sales Act, which it prohibits, you using bot technology to buy and sell tickets. But the issue is it has been criticized heavily because you've only had one case taken to court in the past 7 years. don't quote me on that. Yeah, it has been criticized a lot because there is a lack of enforcement. And as we can see in the US, I mean, there's so many articles talking about people being completely priced out of tickets, even on Ticketmaster, where I even saw a video the other day of these girls trying to go see, I think it was Taylor Swift actually, and they literally were on Ticketmaster and it was showing tickets for like £1,000, which is, it's crazy. They're just helpless at this point because it's just, what do you do? Like, people don't have that kind of money. Like, the fans, you know, if fans at the end of the day, they don't want to be spending this obscene amount for a concert, which is only a couple of hours. Like, the most that I would pay for a concert is probably £100. And that is, you know, if it's a stadium, 100 or 120 maximum. I would not go above that at all. But that's the thing. I think Ticketmaster just has lost sight of sort of who the fans actually are and what they are willing to spend at this point. And then in terms of the EU, I mean, it'll be very interesting to see how the AI Act is going to affect bots, especially. Because at the moment, so what I've been discussing in my research is how the AI Act, it defines what an AI system is, but a bot doesn't necessarily, it's a question of whether it can fall under that definition or not. And also how much of a risk, because it uses a risk-based approach. So the question is, will a bot be considered as a high risk or a low risk now? So I think in the future, it's definitely going to be an interesting one to see whether the courts will treat it as a high risk, because in my opinion, it definitely is. But I think as well, as a final thing for the EU, I mean, you've got the Digital Services Act in Article 25. They state that it's essentially criminal to design and organize platforms that will manipulate the decision-making process of individuals. And in the case of Ticketmaster, they can definitely, well, most likely actually be penalized for this, because for the Oasis example, no one was given any indication that there was a dynamic pricing model used. So in that sense, I think they might be done for this. It will be interesting to see actually what happens with that. But I think definitely for Ticketmaster, they need to redesign their websites to keep fans informed of what's going on. So I think actually, as a final point, that is a big issue. There's a lack of transparency where the fans, especially like myself, from having to do a deep dive into understanding how this system works and how the whole experience works. There are so many people out there who actually don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And like for example, I didn't even know, I thought ticket bots was just one type of bot. There is, within the actual term ticket bot, you've got 5 other bots working at the same time, which I know it baffled me as well.
But what sort of 5 other bots? Like,
so a ticket bot is made up of, you've got, for example, the bots that monitor the market. So they will monitor when tickets go on sale, what time they go on sale, how much roughly they're going to be, which ones are the most sought after, which in most cases is the general standing. So those sort of factors. Then you have the ones that are the queue jumpers. So these ones essentially will have cracked the code so Ticketmaster uses a code for its queue. These bots will have already cracked the code, so then they can essentially get a lower place number in that queue. So the ones at the front are the fake accounts. They're the bot accounts essentially trying to get through. So then they will get through first. And then you've got your ticket purchasing ones. So these are the ones that will then also fill all the information, buy the ticket, and then you've also got the bots that will then immediately list that ticket on a secondary ticketing website.
Right. On that note, this is very concerning, but there's also so much to discuss in this conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. But on that note, I think it's time to bring this episode to an end. Thank you so much, Katherine, for your time and for sharing aspects of your research with us. To our fellow listeners, I think this conversation touched upon aspects which is slowly affecting all of us. Even if you're not somebody who's interested in concerts, if nothing is done today about this will affect everyone who's a sports lover, entertainment lover, cinema lover, every one of us. So keep following Katherine for her updated research. We are very excited for her final thesis, her final findings, and how this research will go ahead. And on that note, please keep following the Law Pod. we have some very exciting stuff coming for you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me.